The continent of Zeah, a long subject of controversy both canonically and in the old school RuneScape community. While Great Kourend claims itself as a land of wealth, comfort, and security, where its people work to bring peace and prosperity, the kingdom remains divided, with each of the 5 territories living independently. Enter Hosidius, the newest addition to the One Chunk Stampede. Jose is just a local Hosidius man with an unwavering internal calling to unite each district into one kingdom. Starting from the Hosidius marketplace, our goal is to complete the Kingdom Divided quest, unlocking one chunk at a time, completing a set of tasks required to unlock each new chunk. Jose is not your typical one chunker. You see, I simply don't have the gall to take on an extreme, semi-extreme, or even somewhat kind of extreme one chunk like a lot of the lovely inspirational folks within the community. This one chunk will be fairly vanilla and will take shape closer to something more casual like Citizenscape series. That's not to say challenging grinds and bosses aren't in store, but Jose isn't after pets. He's not set on breaking his morale over draining grinds, and while he will make use of drops to further his skill set, he isn't relying on raw resource monster drops to progress his skills. Slayer construction and farming will all be passive when it comes to unlocking new chunks, though given his Hosidius roots, he is naturally inclined to becoming a master farmer before completing a Kingdom Divided. Jose is set on uniting the Great Kourend and doing whatever it takes to save his home. What will that look like? We're just gonna have to see for ourselves. Our journey starts smack dab in the middle of Hosidius. Now for full transparency, at the time of recording this video, this account has been going for about a month, so Jose and I are going to recount his journey from the beginning to the best of our abilities. But it will be a bit more summarized than how the series will proceed going forward. Now, we had no chance to complete X marks the spot to make it to Zeah to begin with, but we arrived with empty pockets and a heart full of ambition, thus beginning the journey. This starting chunk is a fruitful one. We've got a bank, multiple reliable food sources, not to mention a range to cook most things on, plus various methods to utilize for our early and mid-skilling grinds. There are magic trees which will give us a sizable grind, though we've got no access to any kind of woodcutting axe, so that is something that we will be waiting for us later on. This chunk also gives us a few manageable tasks to start out. Pickpocket a guard, cook a botanical pie, cast wind strike, and achieve a few best in slot items from men and women, a bronze medhelm, and an iron dagger. Lastly, an achievement diary task in stealing from the Hosidius fruit stall. We quickly began to train our thieving, earning a little bit of starting GP until we could hit the bakery stall. Stealing these baked goods will get me set up well for the thieving grind to come. And thanks to the cows and the occasional imps that wander in our area, the early combat will be pretty forgiving. The bakery stall and eventual fruit stall I have available in my chunk were great for early thieving XP. However, the guard dogs around the marketplace would pose their momentary threats, and thanks to some real lack of attentiveness on my end, would be the reason old Jose didn't make it far as a hardcore Ironman. I feel like it's almost like the chunk equivalent to Dark Mages south of Varrock, just ending my hardcore journey, but it is what it is. With my low HP creating obstacles in the thieving grind, it was time to bolster our vitality. Now the irony here is real. As noble as our intentions may be, in order to save Hosidius, we must first terrorize Hosidius. First thieving from the local stalls, to then acting just belligerent in the garden of a nearby pub, brutally assaulting various men and women. Please forgive my immersion-breaking strength, as I am tanky enough to have access to some of the most exclusive servers in the entire game at this point in the account. Now, all of the terror that we are bringing isn't without good reason, as we will need a Golanova fruit top for our botanical pie, and our best in slot items are locked behind the beatdown of innocent civilians. The kills were slow and steady until over time our kicks and punches became more powerful. One of the most charming things about a One Chunk account is how valuable common and mundane items can become, so we're going to be holding on to most of these drops. The men and women were a refreshing source of some herbs, and even though herb lore is a distant goal for this account, it feels like we're getting some worth out of what are usually unappealing drops. The drop rate for the bronze medhelm is 1 in 64, which we got relatively quickly. However, the iron dagger, a 1 in 128 drop, took us over 200 kills. Now, this is nothing crazy by any means, but just a little taste of what I'm sure will come in the future. The Iron Dagger is also available through the town guards, at a drop rate of 1 in 21 1/3, though killing guards was not viable at the time. With some proper weaponry and some bolstered HP, I'm now much more comfortable to continue the thieving grind in the presence of the guard dogs. Eventually, using the mind runes that we got from the men and women, and the air runes that we would eventually get from the guards, we were able to cast Wind Strike, crossing that off of our list. This is probably the first account I've ever had that all of the fruit I've stolen didn't just get dropped on the ground, left to rot. Not only do I need a Golanova fruit top, but these cooking apples will come in handy for my cooking grind, and since strange fruits cure poison, and jangerberries offer small stat boosts, they're going to be clutch for us, considering herb lore is locked away for quite some time. Our cooking grind really got going when we committed ourselves to the cow field nearby. The quicker kills made for some faster prayer XP, though it's going to be a grind before we see any kind of reasonable return here. We would go on to cook a few hundred slabs of meat, which we would keep a healthy stockpile of since we are going to need this later on. Logava's fruit stall sells pots of flour, which is huge as it opens up the ability to speed up the cooking grind. By using the cooked meat that we got from the cows, once we hit level 20 we unlocked meat pies. Though the burn rates were pretty high, so we held off on cooking the pies and just built up our stock of meat until our cooking level got a little higher. Once we had more success with the pies, this became our primary cooking method, as well as the implementation of apple pies after level 30, and it would stay that way pretty much all the way until our goal of level 52. At this point, I was bouncing between cooking sessions and pickpocketing the master farmer to fund some future farming grind. Finally, 40 thieving was reached, allowing us to pickpocket a guard and mark off another task on the list, leaving just one final task before the chunk is complete. The time has come to cook a botanical pie. Delicious. This chunk was really fun because of all the different grinds kind of synergizing together. It felt like most of everything I did was connected in some way. Major shout out to Lagava, who once she forgave me for all the lost revenue I brought upon her business through theft, allowed me to purchase the flour I needed to cook this beautiful pie. Fun fact, I've never actually made any pies on the main game, outside of a red berry pie for Thurgo or something along those lines, just further reinforcing the new ways to approach things within this one chunk game mode. Chunk complete. Completing the first chunk felt so rewarding despite only having some small grinds attached to it and overall being pretty kind, but the fact that I was able to expand the map for Jose just had me feeling right. It was time for our first roll, and there's nothing incredibly staggering that we're in danger of rolling just yet. Let's go over the options. To the south lies a free chunk, no tasks involved, and there aren't even new monsters that register as being in that area, though that's not entirely the case with the unicorns that wander in. This would also open up our first allotment, which being a Hosidius native, feels pretty fitting to unlock early. Safe to say, this would be my first choice. To the west is more or less another free chunk, but this one has got a few small animals that we'd have to kill, tearing at my heartstrings. We will be aiming to kill every monster in every chunk we roll at least once, so this would give us a couple of souls to claim before earning a new chunk. There's another bank spot as well as a fishing spot that we won't have access to anytime soon. Those are definitely the easiest, and while neither offer anything that game-changing, still come with their benefits. The next two chunks, depending on the order that I get them, will be incredibly beneficial, but will require some work in getting them done. The chunk to the east will open up the Hobgoblins, the optimal combat training option I have in my direct vicinity. The best in slot tasks will bolster our weaponry up to steel, as well as provide better loot than humans or cows can provide. I don't need this chunk next, but as long as I get this chunk before the one to the north, I'm happy. And why is that, you may ask? That's because the chunk to the north will provide our first challenging foe, the headguard. There are a few simple tasks like collect a black cape from a highwayman and then dye it purple, but the headguard contains two really good items for where I'm at on their drop table, the rune scimitar and rune kite shield, both at a chance of 1 in 512. This means I've got no reason to believe I won't have to get cozy and settle in and grind out some kills on this level 84 killing machine. And this guy hits hard, man. And without better weapons, this could be painful. Not to mention, if I roll this chunk before the one to the east, the steel weapon improvements basically become irrelevant when otherwise they could serve some real benefit for a while. So with that being said, we ended up rolling the chunk to the east, and it was time to get familiar with some hobgoblins. The slaughter was on, and thanks to my large stockpile of food, I was content to get nice and cozy. The full task list at hand is as follows. Collect a steel dagger, which is 1 in 42.67, and a steel spear, 1 in 64. If you're unfamiliar with the chunk man and asking why it's necessary to collect multiple different melee weapons of the same tier, that's because each item serves as a best in slot in some form or another. For example, as the steel dagger's lack of magic reduction makes it my current best in slot magic weapon. The spear would act as our best in slot two-hand as well. We would also have to collect a blue wizard hat from the imps that spawn here, however, we already picked that up from a wandering imp earlier on. In addition to killing both the armed and unarmed hobgoblins, we also need to kill a unicorn and unicorn foal, but that served as no threat. And all in all, it really didn't take too long to complete this grind. We were able to get both steel weapons, including the steel longsword, in just a couple hundred kills. Now that Jose has got himself a new weapon, he's feeling good. And I am so thankful that I don't have to take down that headguard with an iron dagger. On the second roll, I unlocked the area just south of the market. While this is a free chunk, it comes with a serious benefit. I can finally begin farming. I immediately raced to Marisi, bought some supplies, and began raking my first patches, just out of sheer excitement to have unlocked a new aspect and skill for the account. However, since this was a free chunk, my first farming level would actually come in just a little bit. Roll number 3 would introduce us to one of the other cities within the Great Kourend, Port Piscarilius. We briefly spent some time here when getting off the boat, but we quickly got out of there. However, the issue that this chunk presents is that I actually have access to very little of it. Nothing noteworthy either. We're only allowed on this little bit of land, just this little teeny guy. I say in absolutely no jest, this chunk does nothing for us right now, making it another free chunk with some tasks that we'll need to address later. Time to move on. For the next roll, we would unlock chunk 6969. Nice. This is actually going to be a huge chunk, not only for its own requirements, but this is the exact chunk needed to open up the previous chunk. So let's come back to the prior chunk to explore the new area, now that we can actually access more than just a small piece of shoreline. This chunk doesn't present many obstacles that we need to overcome, as the only tasks that we have here are to purchase and wear a Tyrus helm, which becomes my best in slot headgear for the time being, as well as a spicy piece of fashionscape, a few slaughtering tasks, as we'll take down a pirate, a seagull, and a mugger, none of which have any kind of drop table. Pirates usually have a drop table consisting of some items that would actually really benefit us here, but this pirate drops nothing but bones. The biggest addition that we gain from this chunk are the charter merchants, who will not only sell us the Tyrus helm, but will also provide us with pineapples to fuel our super compost production, and some other resources that will come in handy down the line when crafting becomes a thing. The purchase of these pineapples would ultimately lead to our first farming levels when we made them into super compost. It's worth mentioning now that these charter ships will not become available until we explore more of Zeah, but they will become vital in completing the quest. But with that being said, this chunk is complete. However, given the wacky way it was unlocked, we do not get a new chunk to work with. Now that the board has developed a little bit, let's take a look at some of the new chunks that we may venture into in the future. Just north of our entry to Port Piscarilius lies, well, more Port Piscarilius! Though this chunk is much less forgiving than the one before it. This chunk would open up a source to buy raw fish, including sharks, meaning 80 cooking would be required before we can move on. By far the biggest grind we'd have seen at this point. The vinery would only provide us with another bank chest at this point, seeming as its main set of tasks are all Hobgoblin related, and those wrinkly bastards are in the rear view now. The southernmost chunk would be a welcome addition to our area, as it would not only ease us into a new skill with a light mining requirement, but it would also give us access to sand crabs, which will eventually become crucial to the account because we're going to be tested in combat fairly early on. The final new chunk, Forthos Dungeon. Yikes. We would be thrown right into the wolves with a handful of formidable foes waiting for us in the dungeon. The runed scimitar and kite shield from the headguard are going to be so clutch before coming into this dungeon. A plethora of tough enemies wait us down here, plus we are right next to Sarachnis, though technically not quite in the same chunk, I guess. I'm not exactly sure how it totally works. We'll talk about that in the future. This is by far the most daunting chunk that we have any chance of landing on, but we can't look back now. This is episode 1 after all. After all the suspense, we can finally turn our focus onto our newest chunk, north of the Hosidius market, where we will have to face the headguard. There are a couple other small tasks that we'll need to complete here beyond the rune items we need to collect, so we went ahead and got a cape from a highwayman. Dyeing it purple was no issues thanks to the items spawned near our allotment patch, and with these menial tasks out of the way, it's time to focus on the real challenge this chunk has for us. Since I'm still backtracking here, I had to do some digging in my RuneLite folders to determine what exactly my combat stats were when entering the chunk, or at least preparing to take on this souped up wannabe warrior. From what I gathered, I'm confident to say the first combat levels we gained on this chunk were 38 attack, 31 strength, 31 defense, 35 hit points, and 23 prayer, giving me a total of 41 combat-ish, kinda. Needless to say, I was getting smacked by this dude, time and time again. I tried flinching, but honest to God, I don't know how anyone could manage to do that over an extended period of time. Salute to you soldiers. With every kill this man had over me, every time I had to flee, I could feel him laughing, taunting me as I made the shameful run back to Port Sarim to come home. This headguard had become my enemy. So, given that I clearly was not equipped in-game or in reality to tackle this Shazine-covered turd, I began training on the nearby guards, those under my rival's unit. I felt that slaughtering his men would eventually break his morale, giving me the mental victory I needed to start overcoming the odds. I didn't even bother burying the bones, I just left them for him to see. Unfortunately, this did not affect this madman, and he continued to wipe me up and down his command tent. I had to regroup and come up with another plan, and there's no better way to clear your head than to tend to your allotment patch. And in this tranquility, it dawned on me. I was going to need to unlock some protection prayers, namely, the last protection prayer, Protect from Melee, before I was going to be able to cover any significant ground with this guy. Now this prayer grind was something I was not exactly looking forward to. Let me explain. If I've got 23 prayer right now, I have accumulated about 6,291 prayer experience. To achieve level 43, I will need 50,339 experience. This is nothing outrageous in old school standards. However, the only method we have available to us is burying bones and scattering the ashes of the couple imps that are available to us. If we committed to burying bones, Jose would need to bury 9,789 bones, a grind I am not keen on, but don't have many other options. If we went with imps exclusively, thanks to them giving us 10 XP per drop, we would only need to kill 4,405 of them. This is much better, but less availability and much less combat XP, so I decided we're gonna do a bit of everything. I knocked out a couple early levels by killing more Shazine guards, but the drops were not very lucrative, so eventually I made my way back to the wrinkly bastards we know as Hobgoblins. We would spend quite some time here at the Hobgobs, amassing quite a few herb seeds to keep the stock of unusable herbs up, as well as more GP and runes. I didn't bother picking up many limpwort roots, given we will be planting many of them in the future, I'm sure. As the prayer levels became further and farther in between, I had to resort to the imps, finding a cozy little spot right between two spawn points. However, before I could finish my prayer grind, I made another realization. The Great Kourend is home to a few unique features and things to do. one of those having the option to tackle organized crime through intelligence gathering. While this minigame, I guess, is based out of Shazian, we don't need to have access to the city to participate in bringing down said hoodlums. The way this works is, a group of criminals will spawn and hold intel meetings around various locations on Zeah. Fortunately for us, we have access to a few of these spots. When these meetings happen, a number of level 45 gangsters and a level 76 gang boss will spawn for 5 minutes across all worlds. The main point of this minigame is to gather bits of intelligence, and then turning them in for a training manual that can be used for combat XP. These intelligence pieces are unbankable, and you have to get to Shazian to turn them in, so we're not going to be hanging on to any of those. This was primarily a way to earn Shazian favor, but now that the Kourend favor system has been removed, the main motivation for real players is the plank drops that are offered, which will bring their own benefit to us down the line, but what brings me in is their weapons and armor. Not only do they drop a full, juicy set of black armor, including a black scimitar to go along with it, but they also drop a rune scimitar at a rate of 1 in 80. Now, I'm no genius, but I'm relatively certain 1 in 80 is a better chance than 1 in 512. I'm also certain that 45 and 76 are both lower than 84. This would make the decision to hunt organized crime a no-brainer. The only drawback is this instance only happens about every 30 minutes or so, which could take place in 34 possible meeting locations. 34, and we only have access to 4 of them. I ran past these groups multiple times early on when I had no business getting in combat with a cow, let alone a full-on criminal. But they were rather manageable as long as I could pull them into single combat areas or strategic spaces. This was a motivating option to continue the search for some rune items, with some added incentive of extra upgrades. While my rules didn't cause the chunk picker to make getting any of these a chunk task, and since I realized it pretty late, I figured I would go ahead and just collect all of the black item drops anyway. Eventually, in between farming, tackling crime, and chasing down over 2,000 imps, I finally reached 43 prayer, meaning it was time to visit an old foe, the headguard. The kills were coming in sweet as I exercised my superiority over my adversary, putting him down time and time again. It felt good, and we began to make some headway in getting some kill count. We were even blessed with an extremely clutch upgrade when we got the steel plate body from a mystery box. Killing the headguard was rather click intensive if I wanted to get more than just a couple kills in each trip, but eventually we got a rune kite shield, one half of the rune items that were keeping us locked in this chunk. We got the kite shield around 150 kills, which had me feeling ecstatic and spoiled with fortune. I even began to then expect the rune scimitar to drop any moment now. But that moment never came. Kill after kill, the guard never dropped a rune scimitar, and it was starting to weigh on me. It was starting to sting. But fortunately for Jose and I, we actually got the rune scimitar from a gang boss in the Hosidius cow patch. Between 80 gangsters and 6 gang bosses, we scored the rune simi, a huge upgrade to our account that will make anything melee combat related much easier. This ended up being what I think a great decision to go after organized crime. Not to mention, we even got the black chain body to complete all of our possible upgrades. This was the most painstaking chunk yet, but we've only got more hills to climb as we continue the journey. If you've made it all the way to this point in the video, that's strange, but I appreciate you. Giving a like makes me feel nice, and subscribing would amplify the motivation to get more of Jose's progress out to you as soon as possible. We've got a lot to do in the next video, so I hope to see you there. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video. Take it easy.